All right, let's dive into secretarial practice, specifically Chapter 5 on deposits. I know, this chapter can feel a little intense. But don't worry, today we're going to cut through all the noise and focus on exactly what you need to know to absolutely nail this on your exam.
So how are we going to tackle this? Well, think of it like we're building an exam prep pyramid. We'll start with the simple stuff, the basics, as our foundation. Then we'll build on top of that with the rules, the limits, and finally, the really complex procedures. Structuring it this way makes it way easier to understand and, trust me, much easier to remember when you're sitting in that exam hall.
Okay, let's lay down the first block of our pyramid. Before we get into any of the complicated rules or numbers, we have to answer the most fundamental question of all. What in the world is a company deposit? Now, the legal definition is pretty broad, but for your exam, I want you to think about it in a really simple way. A deposit is basically a short-term loan. Instead of going through all the hassle of getting a bank loan, a company can just raise money faster and more directly from its own members, or sometimes even from the public. It's a quick way to get cash for short-term needs. Okay, that leads us right to our next big question. And this is a huge one, folks. This is where a lot of students get confused, and it's a super common exam topic. So, who are the players? Who is actually allowed to accept these deposits? This table is your cheat sheet. Seriously, look at the pattern here. Your average private company and your standard public company, they can only take deposits from their own members, kind of like borrowing from family. But an eligible public company, that's the special one. They get the green light to accept money from the general public. And then you have government companies, which are the opposite. They can only take from the public. Knowing these little differences is perfect for scoring on those short answer questions. All right, we know who can accept deposits. Now let's talk about the limits. This section right here is pure exam gold. It's all about the numbers, the specific figures you absolutely need to have memorized for those multiple choice questions. So let's get into it. First up, tenure. How long can a company hold on to a deposit? Well, the standard window is pretty clear. It can't be for less than 6 months, and it can't be for more than 36 months. It's a hard and fast rule. But you know there's always an exception, right? For a real cash crunch, a company can accept a deposit for as little as 3 months. But, and this is a big but, there's a catch. The total amount of these short-term deposits can't be more than 10% of its core capital and profits. So you have to remember both parts of that rule, the shorter time and the smaller financial cap. And this chart just lays out the borrowing limits perfectly. An eligible public company borrowing from the public, they're capped at 25%. A regular public company borrowing from its members, or a government company, they get to go up to 35%. But check out the private company, they can borrow up to 100% of their capital and reserves from their members. These three numbers, 25, 35, and 100%, you gotta know them. Okay, so we know who can play and what the limits are. Now let's dive into the rules of the game. These are the non-negotiable, essential conditions that every single company has to follow when accepting deposits. So, deposits basically come in two flavors, secured and unsecured. The big difference maker is something called a charge. Just think of a charge as collateral. For a secured deposit, the company is pledging some of its assets, like land or buildings. If they default, the depositors have a claim on that stuff. With an unsecured deposit, well, you're relying purely on the company's promise. There's no safety net. So if there's collateral involved, who's looking out for the depositors? That's the job of the deposit trustee. Think of them as a guardian. They're an independent party that holds that charge on the assets for everyone. Their whole job is to make sure the company plays fair and the depositors' interests are protected. You wouldn't lend money to a stranger without knowing if they're good for it, right? Same idea here. Before a company can even ask for deposits, it has to get a financial report card. That's the credit rating. An agency checks them out and gives them a grade on their ability to pay back their debts. And this rating isn't a secret. It must be printed right there in the advertisement for everyone to see. Now, this is another huge safety net. The law forces companies to set up a special, dedicated savings account. It's called the Deposit Repayment Reserve Account. Every single year, they have to put at least 20% of the money that's due to be repaid that year into this account. And that cash is locked down. It can only be used for one thing and one thing only, paying back depositors. Okay, deep breath. We've covered the what, the who, the how much, and the rules. We've got all the pieces. Now, let's put it all together and walk through the actual blueprint, the step-by-step procedure a company has to follow.
This shows you the whole journey. It all starts inside the company, with approvals from the board and shareholders. Then they get their credit rating. Next, and this is key, they have to file their ad with the Registrar of Companies, the ROC. That's the government watchdog. Only after the ROC gives the okay can they actually publish the ad and start collecting money. And finally, see that last step? They must issue a deposit receipt within 21 days. Remember that number. Here's a quick but really important distinction for your exam. If a company is only inviting its own members to give deposits, the document they send out is called a circular. But if they're inviting the general public, it's called an advertisement. Knowing the difference between those two words can easily bag you a few extra marks.
Phew, we have covered a lot of ground. So before we wrap up, let's do a rapid-fire recap to make sure the most important stuff is locked in your brain. Think of this as a mini quiz, a lightning round to get you exam ready.
First question. Ready? What exactly is deposit insurance?
It's an insurance policy. The company has to take it out to protect depositors. It covers both your original investment and the interest you've earned, all the way up to 20,000 rupees for each person. It's a really crucial safety measure, especially for smaller investors.
All right, next question. A simple number, but a very important one. How many days does a company have to issue that deposit receipt after they get your money?
You got it, 21 days. That is a strict deadline, and it's one of those facts you absolutely have to remember. And there we have it. Our pyramid is complete. Look, the absolute key to crushing this chapter on your exam comes down to remembering the 3 core building blocks we covered today: who the players are, what the rules of the game are, and of course, all those crucial numbers and timelines. Keep this structure in mind, and you're going to be totally prepared. You've got this.